Africa's e-commerce industry is expected to rake in $75 billion by 2025, despite facing challenges such as lack of bandwidth and sophisticated financial infrastructure. But as more Africans access the internet, the industry is still growing in leaps and bounds. We're now joined by Mario Toscano, Client Relationship Manager at uafrica.com, to take us through the promises of the industry. They recently held the e-commerce conference and awards in Johannesburg. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mario. Just tell us a little bit about this conference and the significance of this event.
Well, thanks for having me, and I think it's certainly been a long week. The e-commerce conference is an annual event. It's now in its ninth year. We teamed up with industry leaders like Takealot, Shopify, PayPal, e-Solutions by DPD Laser as well. And the whole idea was to bring local and international experiences and knowledge to South African e-commerce owners, online store owners, so that we can encourage them and kind of build them, within the sector. And that was the whole idea, and I think it went off quite well, yeah.
Now, of course, you also, the awards are quite a big part of it all, and as you mentioned, companies like Takealot, as well as Kalahari, Groupon, and Yappy Chef doing particularly well. What makes it do so? What distinguishes those from others in the fact that they're the top e-commerce retail sites?
Well, when we look at the awards, when we sort of classify the websites that do the best, we take a lot of different things into account. We take sort of the SEO into account, so site speed. We take look and feel. We take the whole checkout process. So it's evaluated on many different things, and Kalahari was obviously voted as the public's favorite. And Zando taking home a lot of awards as well. This year, though, we also had, for the first time, our best small business e-commerce store, and that went to Poetry this year. And that came about as a result of, small businesses in South Africa doing a lot. Small businesses in South Africa, although they may have limited budgets, limited resources in terms of staff, they are still doing fantastic things in the e-commerce space.
Now, of course, the focus has been largely on South Africa, but economies like Kenya are also growing in this market.
Yes, definitely. Kenya, Nigeria certainly showing a lot of growth. I think we're still the leader in South Africa, in Africa rather, in terms of e-commerce. Us at uAfrica, we're doing quite amazing things. We've got more than 1,000 stores on board. And we're kind of trying to grow that base as well. And that base mainly forms part of small business. But certainly in Africa, e-commerce is growing largely on mobile because of the mobile internet penetration. But certainly it is growing quite rapidly, yes.
And that is quite remarkable when one considers some of the challenges. Apart from bandwidth and such things, there's also just the fact that you have to gain people's trust to be willing to spend their money online.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing in South Africa. Typically consumers have preferred to err on the side of caution when it comes to online and e-commerce. And what in previous years, what we were seeing is people were rather going to the physical store rather than to the online store, or people were paying rather by EFT, things like that. But I think that e-commerce is, the understanding of e-commerce is certainly advancing in South Africa, and people are certainly taking e-commerce seriously and certainly buying more online. Things like security used to be issues in the past, and that's less of a concern now for consumers because more online stores are taking that up, taking the onus on themselves and ensuring that that's done right from the start.
Now, we're reading here, of course, that this is going to be a $75 billion industry by 2025. Just tell us a little more about this growth path that you see for e-commerce.
Well, it's interesting. We had some stats yesterday at the conference, and we've partnered with one of the global leaders in online stores in terms of setting up online stores. And I think the idea within South Africa is to not only set up online stores, but it's also to get those online stores onto as many sales platforms as possible, what we term omni or multi-channel. We're also working very, very closely with providers like PayFast to facilitate credit card payments and things like that. Also, we're working with South African accounting firms to kind of integrate the accounting systems into e-commerce as a whole as well as couriers. I know logistics in this country can be quite a nightmare, and it's something that we're working on. And certainly, I think that it is going to grow. It's an exciting space to be in, certainly because, 10 years ago, the sort of barriers to entry for small business were a lot higher than they are now, and we're kind of diminishing those over the years. Capital outlay and things like that in terms of what you need for an online store have come down drastically. So it's really exciting in terms of what we can see, entrepreneurs coming up with. Some of the examples would be things like scented colored toilet paper that people are selling online, 5 kilogram jelly babies. So there certainly are a lot of creative minds out there, and I think that the space is getting very, very exciting.